So some of you are new to this channel, and I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. It's much appreciated, but with new folks comes folks that are new to me. And as to be expected, there are some folks that take issue with some of the things that I've said, and then they take that and apply some sort of nonsensical default. One that I've seen a couple of times, for example, is that I'm some male version of Candace Owens. First of all, you basic level 1 political commentator. Just because you're new to me doesn't mean that I'm new to this. This channel is over a decade years old, but it has gone through several rebrands. However, I've been talking about politics and social issues since about 2010. In the process, I've been the co-founder of one of the biggest libertarian media platforms called Being Libertarian. I fronted 2 semi-known bands as of recent, the most recent being the one that I'm currently in called Backwards, that of which had our debut album land #1 on the alternative new artists and #2 Heat Seeker album on the Billboard charts. We also we're #5 hard rock, #11 rock album. Check those sound scans. I've also had the blessing of speaking internationally and have appeared on numerous major media platforms. And though I'm a year younger than her, Candace that is, I had the blessing of doing all of this long before Candace linked up with TPUSA and triggered y'all to the oblivion. I'm not new to this, I'm just new to you. But while Candace doesn't offend me as much as she offends many of y'all, her and I are not the same politically, nor are we on the same exact page and approach socially. Y'all just see that we are both in opposition to leftism, and you're too stupid to understand that being in opposition to you, or even having similarities in that regard, does not mean that we are in exact alignment. So, newbie, here's the layout. No, I'm not a leftist, and no, I'm not what you generalize as a quote-unquote right-winger. And I'm certainly not a centrist either. I'm a libertarian, and not just that, I'm an anarcho-capitalist, meaning I don't want the state to exist at all. I have material all over discussing politics, but I get it. Most of you are new here because of my thoughts on comics and whatnot. Considering that I'm an ANCAP, I'm probably going to piss you off at some point, or you're going to disagree with me at some point. But my political philosophy is purely economic. Libertarianism is about private property rights, starting with self-ownership. It has nothing to do with social preferences. You can have whatever social preference you want, so as long as you don't use aggression upon another individual. Libertarianism is not like this cool kids club or anything like that. So now that that's out the way, the people that tend to be in opposition do not like my views on diversity. I've long said that the push for diversity is a sham, it's a con game, etc. But I've done multiple videos on this channel, one of which I call diversity completely overrated. So yes, I do feel as if overemphasizing diversity is lazy and whack as people push for changing established comic book characters for the sake of representing minorities. But let me explain where I'm at with the concept itself of diversity. Diversity is just a thing. It's a side effect. Sometimes it exists, sometimes it does not, and it is not inherently good or bad when diversity in physical traits or sexuality is present. So as long as something is voluntarily arrived, so what? Whether it's 100% black, 100% white, or 50-50, it doesn't really matter. I will judge it in merit and in value. Now, every other minority group has their reasons for pushing for diversity, but the term diversity effectively now means less white, or specifically less white male. There's no diversity push for the cast of Martin or Black Panther, and if you are pushing for diversity in shows as such, you're a joke. But the con game of diversity, ironically, has been facilitated by white leftists long before I was born. Another thing that people look at me crazy about is really in my opposition to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, being against both affirmative action and the concept of forced integration. Oh my God! Anything forced, be it segregation or integration or whatever, is inherently bad. The Civil Rights Act was a sham because instead of simply eliminating the forced segregation efforts by way of law, such as Jim Crow laws or the precedent set by the Supreme Court cases like Plessy v. Ferguson, it became an anti-property rights push, which is why you see individual states having their civil rights laws that force you to have to sell your own property or serve people that you do not want served to. Like forced segregation, this is wrong. And it's still a problem as you have people trying to force folks to like bake them cakes. And this stupid crap in 2018, now 2019, makes it all the way to the Supreme Court. If you legitimately own something, it is yours and you can do whatever it is that you want to do with it, so as long as it's not in the act of aggression. Yes, this includes denying sale or service to someone. But Eric, what if someone didn't want to sell to you because you're black? I may think that they are stupid, but that's their right. I'm certainly not going to beg them to accept me or to accept my money. Why on earth would I want to line the pockets of someone that doesn't like me? No, I'd rather be a loudmouth and tell everybody so they also don't fund you. Or I may open up a business right across the street from you and sell to everybody, thus putting you out of business. But there's no coincidence that the push for diversity efforts are facilitated by the same folks. Granted, it's important to note that the changing of a race of a comic book character is not the exact same as state-backed diversity efforts. The former is arrived voluntarily. The creators have a right to change whatever they want, just as I have the right to call them clowns for doing it. But the same sort of individuals come from the same base that suggests that diversifying something is inherently good. But the sham and the con game was something sniffed out long before I was born by other leaders during the civil rights era, such as one of my favorites, Brother Malcolm X, which I'll show a video on that at the end of this. But white leftists have convinced minorities that the push for diversity benefits them, but it's not. What they are actually saying is that you are inherently inferior and need to be integrated in order for you to see some legitimate forms of advancement. This is why they don't push to diversify your own things, but they push to diversify something that's more white. Example, black folks have multiple platforms such as the BET Awards, but you get folks crying about the Oscars being so white or the Grammys being so white. But there's no legitimate reason why black folks should see Oscars or Grammys as a more legitimate form of acknowledgement if they truly believe that they are being ostracized by those platforms. That's the thing about the diversity push. If they throw you a few bones of tokenism, it keeps their platforms at the top and they can control the marketplace because they've convinced you to seek them for acknowledgement. And that's my issue with the push for diversity. It perpetuates the idea that someone has to acknowledge or accept you before you can accept yourself. Nobody that actually has any sort of self-worth would actively push for or praise diversity efforts on the basis that this type of person needs to be represented. It is such a foolish thing to instill in youngsters. For example, after the trailer for The Last of Us 2 was released and showed Ellie kissing a chick, I remember seeing people on Twitter react saying things like they were crying in joy because they themselves were gay and they saw a gay person being depicted. Imagine being so insecure that this is your reaction. But you don't even recognize the insecurity because that is your reaction, and these fools have convinced you that you need this sort of thing to be comfortable with yourself. That in itself is toxic. And these one-trick ponies get off by saying things like Marvel was always diverse. That's a complete non sequitur and at best red herring. I'm not saying that diversity is bad. I'm saying that it isn't inherently good or bad, and lack of diversity is not inherently good or bad. It's just a thing. This is why instead of trying to tokenize a character, it is preferable to create a new one with its own backstory. If that doesn't catch on, oh well, try again. If the story one is telling of classic characters steers in a way of little to no diversity, that does not take away from its merit. Give me Blade, give me Black Panther, give me Luke Cage, give me Static. Don't give me the token bone of a black Superman or a black Flash because you were too lazy to write up a character that could catch on. And you instead just transform an already established character, white character that people are familiar with, using like a different timeline or universe as an excuse. And when you're creating these characters, don't overemphasize the racial makeup or sexual preference, as again, you don't do that with non-minority characters. You can include some sort of representation without tokenizing them and putting them there just for the sake of representation alone. When you're comfortable with yourself, you don't need to look to these sorts of things for validation. You can enjoy things based on merit when you don't see inherent superiority in others. I'm not one of those I don't see color type of dudes either. I absolutely see colors, and hell, in some human affairs, I'd prefer a black person to a white person. People do this in preference, for example, to who they date. But my confidence does not rest on whether or not you acknowledge my existence. The fact that you would throw a bone like I'm supposed to take that is self-righteousness, and I'm not going to massage your ego like that. It's no different in my approach to comics. If I see a white character, black character, straight or gay character, I will not allow whether or not they look like me or they're like me be the sole determinant as to whether or not I enjoy it. This is because I'm comfortable with myself and understand that there's a lot more to me than my skin tone, my gender, or my sexuality. To change someone up for the reason of diversifying is lousy and lazy, but it also says that you see someone so inferior that they need that bone of tokenism to be thrown at them for their own self-esteem. You are saying that they aren't even valuable enough for their own authentic representation. Instead, they need to piggyback off of a straight and or white person that has already been established and embraced. That is for losers. On a serious note, understand that there is more to you than your appearance, and do not rely so heavily on the thoughts of others. Some people aren't going to like you. Them, but you're not obligated to be accepted. Watch for those that actually see you as an inferior person but mask that in their push for diversity. Once you see through that gimmick, your identity alone does not control your expectations and actions. Be confident, have some self-esteem, be great. With that, I leave you with a video I've shown multiple times from Brother Malcolm X.
And today the black man, according to the government economist, has spending power of $20 billion per year. We feel that with the black man spending $20 billion a year, not setting up any businesses, not creating any industry, not creating any job opportunities for his own kind, he's not in a moral position to point the finger today at the white man and tell the white man that he's discriminating against him for not giving him a job in factories that he himself set up. If the black man has $20 billion, and these so-called Negro leaders are such geniuses that they can integrate white restaurants and integrate white factories and force themselves into that which the white man has set up, they should use this same ingenuity to show the black people how to pool our wealth and set up something of our own. Instead of trying to change the white man and your mind and make you accept us, we change the mind of the black man and make him accept himself. And as soon as he accepts himself, he'll solve his own problem. He won't be trying to force himself into your factory and into your bedroom and into your kitchen.